Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I welcome everyone to this workshop on direct democracy in Islam. And first of all, my name is, just shortly introduce myself, my name is Amr Huber. I'm working as Communication and Marketing Director at Swissinfo. We are very proud and thankful as Swissinfo to be able to co-sponsor this event. Actually, we are doubly proud because we not only co-sponsor this event, but we launched a media initiative in 10 languages about direct democracy. Direct democracy is indeed something very rare in the world. We heard it yesterday, and as a Swiss, I'm pretty proud to be one of those who has access to this direct democracy. Today's program will be about, as I said, direct democracy in Islam, and we will do it in a series of presentation and then a talk. First, I will make a short introduction. I'm lucky as I'm Swiss, and on the same time I'm Muslim. So I will say from my perspective what is, what in my opinion, the problem is in direct democracy in Islam, or the big questions. Then we'll have Kamel Zif. He is the head of the Arabic language department, who will introduce shortly about and speak about the Swiss direct democracy. What is it? How does it work? Because I guess that most of you don't know exactly how the Swiss direct democracy is really working. Then we will have Dr. Omar Awadullah, who will explain about the direct democracy in the Arab world. We have You heard it yesterday. We are co-sponsoring as Swissinfo also a navigator which shows all the direct democracy possibilities worldwide. And there is a nice, interesting view on the Arab world and the Islam world where there is a lack of direct democracy. So I hope Omar Awadullah will show us, explain us why and how and what's the way in the future. And then I'm thankful and very proud to welcome the Sheikh Rashid Al-Ghanouchi, who will explain what is the Islamic perspective on direct democracy and try to deepen the understanding from an Islamic perspective. Then we will have a round session with a talk with Salahuddin Jurshi, who will moderate it, and we will have all the present here also discussing it. Unfortunately, the Sheikh will not be able to stay with us for this round table. Now, the big question, and we are actually lucky as, or let's say I am lucky as Swissinfo, not only to be a co-sponsor of this event on direct democracy, but we are also launching this media initiative on direct democracy in 10 languages. So you see, I hope you see it a little bit. We have made a site in 10 languages. You will find it in English, French, and Arabic. But we also co-sponsored and built a site which is called People to Power, which is actually a turning point for us in the sense of trying to discuss everything which is around direct democracy worldwide. What we do on Swissinfo is explaining the Swiss direct democracy and how it evolved and how it changed and what are the big issues on that topic. Of course, for us, it's a wonderful occasion to talk about direct democracy in Tunisia. We heard it before. In Tunisia, these instruments will be in the decentralization take an important part. So it will be in the future, I hope so, a very big and important discussion within Tunisia, how this direct democracy, these instruments will be, or this participation will be done on a local and regional level. But we are even more proud because the direct democracy, I mentioned it slowly, or an event on direct democracy is something pretty rare in the Arab world or in the Muslim world, and today it's the first time, this event is the first time, but also this workshop on direct democracy in Islam is actually the first time it ever happened in history. So I'm doubly proud to be able to introduce this topic. It's a topic which is very close to me in the sense I'm Swiss, I know direct democracy, I am grown up in a direct democracy, and on the same time I'm a Muslim. So I have a tradition and I grown up, although I grow up in Switzerland, I have always a very close relation to my country of my mother, that's why my name is Amr, it's Egypt. So I always travel to Egypt and I have a very close relation to the family there, and since I was small I got in touch with Egypt and all the world, or let's say the Arab world as we know it. What is the most interesting thing, and that's the funny thing as being a communication and marketing director, and I started my career as a journalist and I went to public relations, I did marketing, I worked for the government, and then I was specialized in the last 20 years in electronic communication. The funny thing is that I understood very quickly, grown up in two cultures, so being Swiss and being on the same time having another leg in a Muslim country, I understood very quickly that everything we do and we say is a question of perspective and context. So I understood pretty quickly that when we talk, we use words, we use semantics, and everyone understands something, depending on what he thinks of. And whenever we talk and we discuss things, the biggest problem is always to make sure that we really understand each other. I realized that when I had to build huge e-government system, and it was the question of internet. So everyone knew what internet is, everyone. Everyone knows what exactly the government, electronic government, or what the internet could bring and do. But when you talk about it, you understand that everyone thinks about something else. So it's very hard, and mostly in every project I did, the first thing I had to do is to calm things down and then to sit together and think, okay, what are we talking about? Well, what is the issue? What is actually the question? So it was always very clear that, very quickly, that more you talk, more you have an understanding of the other, what he means, then suddenly you start really to have a dialogue and you start to understand what is the problems, what is the issue, and what is the key question. And I think in the direct democracy, or democracy as all, or the Western democracy, and this conflict which is being built up, and I lived it and I live it daily in Europe, is for me a total misunderstanding of values. Finally, I mean, it's clear in Europe when you say that you're Muslim, the first thing is they look at you and say, oh my God, he's dangerous. And I felt it also here when you talk about Islam or Muslim. The second issue is the security issue. So it's funny that everyone, when he hears some words, he creates some context. So it is very important that when we use words or we start to talk, that we really try to understand, okay, what are we saying? What are we trying to say? Because don't forget that every one of us, everyone, has actually his own opinion and his own truth. And that's very important to be able to have a discussion, a dialogue. And I'm saying this because in direct democracy, the dialogue and discussion is the essence. And if there is not the dialogue, not the common understanding, there won't be any possibility to do something together. So to understand each other, we need to use words. And everyone grown up in a family has a cultural context and uses actually the words and the meanings of these words in a total different way. So if we want to understand, we need really to be very careful and very sensitive about when we use a word, what do we mean about it? And we need to be clear that any word, any ideology, any thought we have is only, let's say, a virtual construction and tries to describe a reality. So if I say Islam or if I say Allah, you hear a word, you hear sounds, and everyone feels or understands something in it. But the reality of it, the reality of Islam or the reality of the world or of love or of peace is something else. The semantics, the word itself describes something, but the reality of it, who knows it? For example, if I say Paris, who knows Paris of you? Some visit it, some not, and it has letters. some live in Paris, they know Paris, how it looks like, but who really knows Paris? Do we really know what this place is all about? Not really. And there we see that our capability to understand the reality which is around us is very limited. And that's the beauty of being man. It's with the help of others, we start to discover many other things. So initially, what I mean is that if we want to understand each other, and my problem is that in Europe, and I have to explain them why I'm Muslim, and why I think that Islam is not something bad, I need first to start and say, okay, about what are we talking, and what's really the issue? And if I choose direct democracy in Islam, it's clear there is a Western model, and there is an old-fashioned way of thinking, and they are not compatible. That's what we think, and that's what is said all the time. Now, what is actually democracy, and what is this Western democracy? And I will come then to the religion. With Western democracy, of course, the main discussion, or the main topic, or the key question we need to ask is about power. Is about who has the power, and how does power work, and how is the decision-making actually going on. Now, it's a pretty difficult question about power, because we will say the rich have the power, or for example, God has all the power, or the people should have the power. So the power itself, we need to understand what is influential, what is powerful, what actually makes things change, that our daily life really changes. And what made that our daily life has changed. And I think if you look back at the human history, from the start we were here on this earth, and we look what really changed, or what has changed my daily life, it's probably the things which are the most powerful. Because if I today live in a way, or I live a certain fashion, or I have a certain thinking of something, or following an ideology, it means that this needs to be pretty powerful. Now, if you look back, I actually find only two things who have changed human history. Only two things, pretty simple. The one thing is knowledge. Knowledge, and then in the last couple of decades, technology, has changed the way we think, the way we live, and everything we do. That's one thing definitely we need to admit. That knowledge is something which has changed the way we are. The second thing is, and that's funny because we never talk about it, the second thing we really changed the world are the prophets. I think nobody will put in question that Jesus has changed the world. Nobody will put in question that Buddha has changed the world, and Muhammad has changed the world. Now, they are very powerful. But of course, the power of a prophet is something very specific, and is something we never really discuss it. And it's very difficult to talk about it in Western countries, because in West, the concept of religion and prophets is something pretty old. And it's something which they say you need to believe, to think, and to give them an importance. Well, for a Muslim, it's a little bit difficult, because for us, it's not only belief, it's let's say, we are sure that the Prophet is an example, and we should follow him. And that actually, whatever we can think of these people, it's just, or let's say, it's our limited capability to really understand what happened then. Now, the big problem we have now is that, of course, if we look at knowledge and we try to understand and see how knowledge changed this world, then we see it that it is only one fact, of course, which made it that this world changed. It's that we started to write down. We had a qalam, a writing pen, and we started to share what we lived, what we experienced, what we felt. And so this sharing of knowledge, this making knowledge accessible, started really to change the way we look at the world. We started to try to understand how a human being is working. We tried to understand how nature is working. And the more people started to look into it, the more people started to participate in this quest of knowledge to understand who are we, where are we going, the more suddenly people started to have a new perception. Every time suddenly new scientific research showed that certain truths were not truth, also our consciousness, our rational thinking started to develop. And it's interesting that how we see today in real life that the spirit, the head, the thinking of human beings are much stronger than all the material and all the power a human being can accumulate. So once people put their knowledge together, they participate, the stronger suddenly values and ideas get. And of course, once the printing machine started in the 15th century, then it really started to affect people. And it didn't take a long time, 1 century, and then in Europe, the revolution started. And the revolution, they talked about the values, the republic values, and that's the basis of the Western society, which is equality, liberty, and fraternity. Of course, it didn't go long for those values. The kings were not very happy, and it went a couple hundred years later, until suddenly the community started to understand that the more they share, the more they let people participate, the stronger they become. And that the sharing of knowledge, and that's very important to understand, knowledge was always power. The more you knew about anything, the more powerful you became. But the information you need to use power or to take the right decision is something extremely important, to get the information. And the information must be true, because if you base your decision on a wrong information, then everything is spilled. Then the second is the deliberation. The more people can have a deliberation, can discuss a matter, I guarantee you the matter itself will be much more mature in the sense of the discussion and of the options, the possibilities one has. And then, of course, comes the decision. And the decision can be taken by one person. If he has very good consultants or very, very good information, then probably he will take the right. Anyhow, don't worry about decisions. They're always 50-50. You always have 50 chance to be right and 50 chance to be wrong. So whether one person is doing it, or a whole parliament is taking the decision, or the whole people are taking the decision, it's always the same process. The better people are informed, the better they can deliberate, they can discuss matters. A mature decision, the better actually evolution will be. And the key in it, of course, is the access to information, is the possibility to have an opinion and to discuss. And the last thing, of course, is to have also access to power. And that's the concept of the democracy, to say that actually power should be shared, and the more people can deliberate and access, then the decisions are actually better. Interesting-wise, Western democracies and all the talks about the democracies is always about votes and the final decision. So we always discuss who we're going to vote for or who are the persons we're going to vote for. But actually what should be in the center of the discussion is the information and deliberation about what should we decide in the future, what are the problems. And often those issues are very little discussed. Now, let's come back to the key question in the sense of democracy, Western democracy, their values. I just explained, yes, there is the value of equality, that everyone is equal, that everyone is free. That's why we have to protect we need the human rights, we need to protect each other, and everyone should participate in the government. It's a human right. Now, it sounds wonderful, but the big problem we have today, and when I tried to start with this media initiative about direct democracy, that's the first thing I said. I said, well, we can speak about direct democracy worldwide and try to explain to people what direct democracy is, but we cannot present it as something good. Then they looked at me and say, why? They said, well, because for everyone outside Europe and America, Europe and America is not really a symbol of those values of liberty, equality, and of justice. Why not? Because, well, as long as you are in Europe, you have those human rights. But if you are outside or you belong to the wrong ethnic or the wrong nationality, then suddenly you haven't any rights anymore. And that's the big problem we have with Western democracies, is that there is a very strong force, a very powerful force, which has hijacked actually those values, those Western values which are put in the center of the whole development, or let's say, of those central values which should be universal and which every nation should adhere to. And that's the problem, that today we live not in a worldwide democracy where those values are respected. The reality is that we live in a neoliberal capitalism where consumption is the whole machine of the economy and of the whole society. So what we created is actually a society, well, it's nice, it's built on rule of law, but what happened with this rule of law, of this justice, is that it created a society of individuals which are egoistic and think only of each other. And where suddenly one material value, the money, has become the central, let's say, value to judge anything which is being done. The problem with money, it is strong, yes, I agree. You can buy anything, you can do anything, but it doesn't have any value. And if you want me to explain you what money is, I tell you frankly, I can't answer you. I would love to speak about love, I have much more to say, but money is worthless, is senseless. And today all the politics, all the decisions are done on an economical logic. And that's what makes this Western democracy suddenly look very ugly for somebody outside which doesn't benefit from it. Especially, and now it gets ugly, especially when you say, I am standing for the liberties, I am for the human rights. But in reality, the incredible thing is that the biggest arms producer in the world are those Western democracies. And the best friend of those Western democracies are dictators. And unfortunately, we have a lot of them. So how does it work? What is wrong? And there I think we need to step back and to try to understand what actually is, and that's the second thing I wanted to say, is the power of the prophets. What was actually the message of those religions? And the problem is that today, and that's very important, that although we have knowledge, although we have science, the real knowledge, the information about what is happening in this world doesn't seem to reach us. It doesn't seem that we really understand what is our situation and where we are going. And there I think the prophets have given us the answer. Because what they said is nothing else than actually, you will live in this world not for a long time. You will go back. You will leave this world. So anything you will achieve, be aware that you will lose it one day. And you are only for a short period in this world. But the purpose of coming here is very clear, and everyone said it very clear. The purpose is the perfection and love, is to be good to each other and not to do bad things. So, for example, not to oppress, not to help others, not to be there when others need us. So the only message was, if you want to be happy in this life, then share, then participate. Make the others feel that they, or that you all are one family, and that you are not enemies from each other. And that once you understand that the only thing in this world you can do is a choice between how you behave to others, then suddenly this message becomes pretty strong. Because it will show very clearly who is doing good to others and who is doing bad. Because the main thing we need to understand is that every one from us is born alone, and every one of us will die alone. So finally, everyone has the truth in him, and he lives with his truth, and he will die with his truth. But he has one thing in common, and that's what we all have, and it's pretty simple. We have only 3 ways of acting and behaving to each other. There is no other way. Either we act to each other with adl, with justice. So when you do something to me, I will do the same to you. That's one possibility. The other possibility is to be zalim, to do bad to another although he didn't do anything to you. And this is in any religion, and even in Western societies, is considered as haram. It's forbidden. You are not allowed, even a plant you cannot do zulm. Even an animal you are not allowed to do zulm. And the third one is actually the most important one. And that's the purpose of everything. And that's actually what was also in the center of the revolutions in the Western world and the center of their thoughts is the concept of brotherhood or the love of the other, or in Arabic, ihsan. So the kamal in the ihsan, this perfection to go towards love and to be able to understand that we are one family. We are definitely one family. And that if we don't care about each other, whether they are in Africa or somewhere else, doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter which name they give to themselves, whether Christian or Hindus or atheists, doesn't matter. Everyone sees the truth as much as he can see. But if we act with brotherhood and with love to each other, then definitely if it is participative, no one will want the power for himself. So I know it was a bit tough. I took a lot of time, I excuse. But one thing I would like to share with you is before we go on, is actually the Swiss Constitution. And the Swiss Constitution, I know you are more oriented to the French-speaking world, so France with its concept of laïcisme is, I think, more current knowledge to you, which they say that religion should be out of any constitution of the state and the government. And I will just read you the preamble, the entry statement of the Swiss Constitution. It starts with, in the name of Almighty God, Bismillah, Bismillah al-Qawi. The Swiss people and the cantons, mindful of their responsibility towards the creation, resolve to renew their alliance so as to strengthen liberty, democracy, independence, and peace in a spirit of solidarity and openness towards the world. Determined to live together with mutual consideration and respect for their diversity, conscious of their common achievements and their responsibility towards future generations. And in the knowledge that only those who use their freedom remain free, and that the strength of a people is measured by the well-being of its weakest members. So what we have here expressed is a belief. We believe in God. And the second we express as Swiss, we say that we need to be careful to each other. Participative and careful in the sense, the better the weak are, it means the stronger the society is. And that's, I think, my last word, and I will give over to Kamal Dif to explain now what is following there, and the problem, as we Swiss also have, for example, with the funds of Ben Ali, is that we don't really also live it when it goes to practice. So let's learn from Western societies when it goes to knowledge, and we need to know that this knowledge which reached Western world actually came from us, that we rediscover what the values we have and the importance of the knowledge we have, and perhaps also understand that Western societies are interesting. The Western democracy is interesting, but I think it needs a revision. It's not Islam who needs a renewal and a revision, but I think it's Western society should be refigured in the sense of how we're going to deal with oppression, how we're going to deal with injustice, inequality worldwide. Thank you. Come on.